Welcome to the Do Life Well podcast. Join your host, Gavin Merwin, and his guests as they explore the nature of doing life well. Now, let's dive in.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Do Life Well podcast. I'm your host, Gavin Merwin. Part 2 coming at you of the personal finance fundamentals, joined again by my good friend, John Tanner. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I would pause, go back and listen to part 1, which was last month's episode prior to diving in today. Part 1, we talked mostly about mindsets, our viewpoint, our vantage point of financial topics, of our money. It's really important to have kind of that foundation set, I think. Today's episode, we're going to get into some practicals, talk through just different topics. What our thoughts and opinions are of it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end all be all. You guys have to take, obviously, on all these episodes, the advice we give and make it fit for your life. But anyway, excited about it. Thanks for being with me again.
Oh, I'm excited. I had a lot of fun with the last episode. So.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with housing. So from a practical perspective, everybody has to have a place to live, right? So renting versus owning. And then when we go down the path of ownership, we can talk about the different ways you can do that. And anything you want to start with to kind of kick the topic off, obviously feel free to do that too.
Okay. Well, I'll say this just kind of before we get talking on these more practical things. Everybody's situation is different. Okay. On the last episode, we talked about if you're, putting something together for your kids, there's a picture on the box that you're trying to replicate, and that is your goals. Those are your dreams, and yes, they can change some along the way. But we need to know where we're going. We need to know at the end of this road, what is the destination that we're headed to? Why are we doing the things that we're doing? And that's going to be different for everyone. So what may be good advice for Gavin may not be the best advice for John. So just kind of keep that in mind. Everybody's headed to a different destination. So some of these practical things will be a little bit different for certain ones. But what we are going to do is kind of give you a broad brush overview. A few different, steps and principles that you can take that'll help you along the way.
100%.
And
if you did not listen to the last, you said 24 years. Is that what you said?
Yes. I've
financial services career
in financial services industry for golly, man, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
For 24 years, and have learned a lot. Not just about wealth management, not just about financial services, but I've learned a lot about people.
Yeah.
And again, to reinforce that, everyone's different. And every person that sits across from me at a conference table, I'm looking at someone different, someone unique, and we tailor the advice that we give everyone to their unique goals, dreams, and needs. And so think of that as we're talking. You kicked it off with housing. Some people, it makes sense to rent. It does not always make sense to jump out and to purchase a house and lock yourself into a 30-year mortgage. A lot of people travel, they have jobs that relocate, and yes, you can buy a house, you can sell a house, but you're never guaranteed that you can sell the house for the amount of money you bought the house, because the housing market is just like the stock market. It does fluctuate. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration. Blanket advice has done a lot of harm to a lot of people. Always and never are 2 words I do not like.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Because people say you always need to buy a house and you always need to do this, that, and the other. Well, not necessarily. You may not need to buy a house today. You may need to rent for a couple of years, then it may make sense later on. We'll get into those things when it does and when it doesn't need to make sense.
Sure.
But always and never are 2 words that you need to really be careful with. So blanket advice, reading a book that tell you always do this, always do that, and the other. Remember this, your situation is unique. Your situation is different from everybody else. So we'll stay away from blanket advice here, and I would encourage you to really be careful with blanket advice.
100%. Generally speaking, the desire to buy a house, I think most people have. Certainly if you're renting, like you said, if you're a travel nurse or you're military or something like that, there are situations where it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do think owning property, owning a house is a great wealth building tool,
Sure.
right? Generally it does go up. Obviously there's situations where it doesn't. But to kind of go deeper in, if I'm wanting to build wealth, if I'm on this path, how important owning a home is, and obviously, maybe I started out of order by starting there.
Oh,
but there's some fundamentals that
yeah.
you need before you go buy a house.
Well, and depending on who you talk to, people will say, one of the biggest assets that you will have will be a home. A home can be an asset and it can also be a liability.
Sure. Sure.
There's a lot of upkeep. If depending on the size of the house you own, let's say a heat pump goes out or air conditioner goes out, that could be $10,000 to $20,000 to repair that. If you're renting a home,
Sure.
it's not on you.
Yeah.
Depending on your lease, if you got the lease, most leases, would require the owner of the home to fix the heat pump,
Sure.
in a residential lease. In most cases, again, I don't want to say in every case, because we do have triple net leases and different things like that
Sure.
you're required to pay the taxes, you're required to pay all these things. But starting out for someone who you haven't built any wealth, you're just beginning your adult life, jumping on owning a home is a lot.
Yeah.
And if you've got parents that can help you, yes, it puts you way ahead of the game. But you're taking on, really at that point, you're taking on a liability. It's not an asset because there's no equity in that
Sure.
home when you first buy it.
Sure.
So you need to be sure and certain you're ready for that. You've got a plan. You know where you are. You need some money in the bank. You need an emergency fund. You need to have, several $1,000s at that time stacked away, amassed, either in a checking account, savings account, or invested some sort of way to get you in a position to be able to take on a liability, because again, it is a liability to begin with because it does not have any equity in it when you first purchase it in most cases.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
100% it does.
Yeah.
I was sharing with John before we started, and I'll tell you guys this. So if you are buying a home, you've got to get a mortgage, right? Mm-hmm. There are lots of different flavors of that. Obviously, I'm not a banker. Go talk to a banker. But there is, generally speaking, 15-year versus 30-year, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, 15-year, that's half of 30 years. But I want to share some numbers, just so as you're listening to this, you can consider a 15-year over a 30-year and why I think it makes sense to do that. So let's say we're buying a $300,000 home, right? Generally speaking, you can Google this, mortgage amortization calculator. This is what I did. I punched these numbers in. A 30-year mortgage, your monthly payment on a $300,000 home is going to be somewhere around $1,800 a month, right? It's $1,800 a month, $300,000 mortgage. Over that 30-year period, in the beginning, if you're not familiar, you're going to be paying more interest than you are principal. Principal is what you owe on the actual property. Interest is what you're paying the bank, right? In the beginning, they front load the interest, for the bank, and we're going to talk about that later, about how to work interest and make yourself money, not the bank money. But the point is, the bank's smart enough to know they're going to front load that interest, okay? On a 30-year mortgage, you don't start paying more on principal, so the home itself, than interest until year 19. So you're 19 years into a 30-year mortgage before you start paying more principal than you do interest, okay? You're paying $1,800 a month. At the end of 30 years, you will have paid just shy of $350,000 of interest. So the home was $300,000. You literally paid the bank, wrote them a check over a 30-year period, $350,000. Okay. If you flip that, and instead of getting a 30-year, you get a 15-year mortgage. So you're still buying a $300,000 home. It's a 15-year mortgage. Your monthly payment's going to be more. Obviously, you're paying it in less time. It's going to be $2,500 per month. So $700 more per month that you're going to have to cash flow on a 15-year mortgage. The power of it, though, is you start paying more on principal after year 4. So instead of waiting 19 years in to where you're actually paying off your debt instead of paying the bank, you're doing that in year 4 on a 15-year. And at the end of those 15 years, you're only going to have paid $150,000 of interest. So $200,000 less to the bank because you did it over 15 years. Now, obviously, we can talk about compound interest and the basics of that. I mean, that's the principle of how that's playing out. But at whatever point you decide it's time to buy a home, I would personally recommend you go 15-year mortgage and plan to be prepared for that, because you're going to save so much money on interest, which is how people build wealth. And like we talked about last time, kind of sacrificing some today for the long term. I mean, you're going to be debt-free in 15 years and not 30. So anything on that topic?
Well, of course, interest rate can adjust those numbers. If the interest rate's higher, the payments can be higher, all of those things. Interest rate's lower, the payments can be lower.
Sure.
So interest rate will make a big difference in those numbers. But I'll say this. I'll take everything back to the plan. And like we said in the last episode, the scriptures say where there's no vision, people cast off restraint or people perish. When you have a vision of where you want to go, okay, the analogy I use a lot of times is, if you've ever had pets, dogs will chase cars. Every car that comes by, they chase that car. That's just what they do. They chase cars. We, as people, if we're not careful, we get into that habit ourselves. We chase things. I want this. I want this house. I want this car. If you've got a plan, if you've got a vision, where you're headed to in the future, and you've got a destination in mind, you have to make a decision. Do you want to go fast or do you want to go far?
Yeah.
I want to go far.
Yeah.
We may go a little slower. It may take us a year or two before we get into that dream house or before we get in that starter home, whatever it is.
Sure.
We may have a friend group of 5 or 6 couples that we go to church with or go, our friends with, and they all may buy homes quicker than we do.
Yeah.
But are you willing to defer that gratification for 3 or 4 years in order to pay it off in half the time?
Yep.
With a lot less money.
Yep.
That's a decision you've got to make. I would tell you this, the most people, I don't know the percentages, but most people secure a 30-year mortgage.
100%.
They pay for a house in 30 years. They never even think of doing a 15-year mortgage.
100%.
But most people do not know those numbers that you just shared. They do not realize that if you buy a $300,000 home and your payments, whatever it is, let's say your payment's $1,500, $1,000 of that, somewhere along those lines, about 2/3 of it,
Yep.
is probably going to interest in the first few years.
That's right.
Okay.
Straight to the bank.
And that doesn't mean banks are bad or evil. You wouldn't have the house without the bank. The banks are necessary. But you got to understand, they're giving you their money. They're in the business to make money. They want something in return. With a 15-year mortgage, they're giving you the same amount of money, but they're on the hook for half the time.
Yeah.
And so because they are on the hook for half the time, and you're paying a much higher, let's put it this way, you're paying a higher or more expensive payment, they'll give you that money for a shorter time for less interest.
100%.
So it does make sense. And what it allows you to do, if you plan on owning your home outright, and let's be clear what that means. Owning your home, most people listening to this, you don't own your home, the bank owns your home.
Yeah, that's right.
But if you want to ever own your home, and that is your goal, then it makes a lot of sense to cut that in half, to do 15 years. Even if it means a little bit of delayed gratification, maybe it takes you 2 or 3 years longer to get in. Or maybe you, instead of like most Americans, I've got a 30-year mortgage and 2 car payments, maybe you pay for a car and only have 1 car payment, take that extra money and put toward that 15-year mortgage at a higher payment to get there quicker.
100%.
100%. If you could not have a car payment, that would be the most the best way.
Sure.
But again, that just depends on you and what you're willing to give up in order to reach those goals.
100%. So another topic I had down is talking about insurance, right? And I think it's similar to the bank in that we're not saying banks are evil, but what we are saying is use it as a tool, get the most out of it for you. You got to look out for yourself.
Sure.
And I think insurance is similar in the sense that you can be what we call insurance poor. We talked a lot last time about knowing your flow of your money, your budget, things of that nature. You can go insure everything, right? And have no money left over for anything else. But insurance is also a tool. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, just like with banks, banks are a necessity. Insurance is a necessity. You can't, we need health insurance. It's a must. You need life insurance, especially if you have a wife or husband and kids. If you contribute to the cash flow in your home, if something was to happen to you, you need that to be replaced. You don't want to be a burden. Kind of going back again, now that we're on insurance, you go back even with your home mortgage. Something we didn't mention, I think it bears mentioning, is deferred gratification. If it takes you 2 or 3 years longer to save to get yourself in a position where you can do a 15 mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage, I think it's also, I know it is, it's important to have at least 20% down, so that you don't have to purchase PMI insurance, because that's added to your payment until you get to around that 15-20%. I think it's around 15 to 20%.
Sure.
Hard to check me on that. I may be off a little bit, but that's less monthly payment.
Yeah.
So have a down payment. Plan for that. You may have to rent for a little while. You asked, when does renting make sense? Well, we're going to pretty much all start there,
That's right.
unless you got some help, unless you've got, parents or family members, or you inherit something. Most of us are going to start there and save some money, put some money back. Not every case, but in a lot of cases, in most cases. So that's one type of insurance. I think life insurance is very important. Can you have too much life insurance? More than likely, if you buy life insurance, if you buy term life insurance, term is something that is going to have a term tied to it, maybe a 10-year term, 20-year term, 30-year term. If you have term insurance, you hope you never have to use that.
That's right.
But if you're married and you're the sole breadwinner of your house and you were to pass away unexpectedly, how long do you want your family to be taken care of?
That's right.
Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? That's what you base the amount of insurance that you would like to purchase.
Sure.
And then obviously you also base that on the amount of premium that you can afford.
Sure.
That's super important. I think to live without life insurance for most people is foolish. But what you said is very important. There's always somebody that'll try to sell you something.
That's right.
Well, you need this. You need term life. You need whole life. You need universal life. You need variable universal life. You need this, that, and the other. Again, every situation is different. When it comes to insurance, when it comes to investing, I would tell you to do this. Find a fiduciary. Find someone who is qualified to give financial advice. Somebody that knows what they're doing. Someone that's a fiduciary. Somebody that can guide and direct you in that. Because there's so much noise out there, Gavin. So much noise. Make sure you get with a professional on that.
Yeah, and I think a couple of practical things that come to mind. Not to be ugly, but just holding an insurance license doesn't mean you're qualified. And what I mean by that is, if you're listening to this and you're like, I heard your advice, I'm gonna go find me somebody. Just because someone holds a life insurance license through the state of Georgia does not mean they're qualified. You need to find someone who's a fiduciary. You need to find someone that's got time under their belt. They're not brand new. Hey, everybody's got to have a start, so that's okay. You didn't start at 24 years of experience, right?
Right.
But you got to find somebody that you trust, that's in your circle of people. I bet if you ask around, there's someone already in your circle that can give you some sound advice. And all these things are tools. I mean, again, let's not go into the specifics because everybody's situation is so different. But like through your employer, you probably have cancer insurance and critical illness insurance and accident insurance and short-term disability and long-term disability. And I mean, there's all these things. The point is, never buy out of fear. Don't let fear be your motivating factor for making decisions. And 2, find you somebody that knows your personal situation and can give you advice. And like a general example is, okay, I'm a female, I'm planning on having a baby, short-term disability may make sense to me, right? Contrast that with, I'm a business owner with equity in buildings and 2 years worth of income in my savings account. I probably don't need short-term disability insurance. But no one can just give a general recommendation of that, which is why it's important to have a person, because you can end up insurance poor if you just buy everything that's sold to you from a perspective of insuring that risk.
Yeah.
Is the point.
That's perfectly said, and I'll touch on something you said. When purchasing something, say we're on insurance, let's just keep it to insurance. When purchasing insurance from someone, make sure the person you're purchasing insurance from sells different types of insurance. They don't just have one tool in the bag. There's no saying that when all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail.
Yeah.
And so, someone who can give you non-biased advice, someone who is looking out for your best interest, and someone you trust, and get referrals, talk to people, see who other people are doing business from. And yes, not everybody needs short-term disability. Some people do though, and consider that. Again, goes back to the plan. Where are you headed? What can you afford to pay? What would derail that plan? My wife and I have a plan where we want to be in 20 years. Well, if I don't make it 20 years, if something happens and I pass away in 5 years, I want her to still be able to make it.
Sure.
I want her to still get to that destination. I still want her to reach that plan. And life insurance is a way that I can make sure I do my part to help.
100%. So going into investing, stock market, things of that nature, probably even more globally broad brushed, because we're going even deeper into, you got to have someone give you personal financial advice. This podcast is certainly not the next hot stock tip.
No.
The most important thing for me, for our listeners, for you to kind of cover and to share is, I think a lot of people don't even understand what the stock market is. How does ownership in business even work? What do you even buy when you buy a stock? Like just basic principles of that, because we don't teach that in schools for whatever reason. I mean, they're doing it more and more than they used to. And I think even talking about like just saving in general, compound interest, I mean, you'd be amazed at how far just $100 a month will go if you have 40 years to save it. You know what I mean? To hit on some of those topics, and that way someone could say, hey, take this and kind of go apply it to my situation.
Well, I think it's important that we understand investing. There's so many ways to invest that have absolutely nothing to do with the stock market. You say, how do you invest your money? There's so many different avenues and different opportunities. If you own a business and you're taking profits from that business and you're putting them back into that business, that's a form of investing.
Sure.
When it comes to diversification, all that means is we invest in multiple different areas. I would say this, and this may sound different, maybe not what people would expect me to say, because a lot of what I do in wealth management has to do with the stock market. I don't think the stock market's for everyone. I don't think it's something that everyone will necessarily need to even consider. But it is a great tool for a lot of people, because it gives you the opportunity to be very simple and very practical. It gives you the opportunity to actually own something that, let's take a company. You can own stocks. You can be a shareholder in a company without having to necessarily worry about the day-to-day operations. And you can own stock in multiple companies so that you can diversify that portfolio. So the stock market gives you the opportunity to own small portions, depending on how many shares you own, of different companies, so that you can diversify across multiple different companies, multiple different market sectors, even multiple different asset classes, and without taking on the liability of just one company and actually having to be in the day-to-day operations. And so again, it's very important. You say, well, John, at what age should I start investing in the stock market, or how much money should I put in the stock market? Well, I don't know that you necessarily should. It's your situation needs to be one that it makes sense for, but if you do want to get started in the stock market, I would tell you this: if you work somewhere and your employer offers a 401k or 403b, and there's other types of plans similar to that, and they have a matching program, that's probably the best place to start, because they're matching up to 3-4%, whatever they'll match, and you can get some tax breaks for doing that. So that makes a lot of sense, and that's usually most of the people that I work with. That was their entry level introduction to the stock market.
Yeah, 100%. Doing it through their employer.
That's
and
right.
then now they're getting ready to retire and having to do it on their own.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, it has nothing to do with the question, but if you work somewhere that offers a 401k, 403b, and you contribute to that and you leave there, make sure you realize you can take that with you. You can take that to someone else to manage, or you can take that to in a lot of cases, to the new plan that you're contributing with the new employee. But don't forget about that and don't neglect that.
100%. Talk about compound interest, just the power of saving early and small. And it's, in a world that's full of reels and flashy and entrepreneurs and get rich quick and all the stuff, I think it's, the turtle wins the race when we're talking about building wealth.
Well, you go back to your analogy of a 30-year versus 15-year mortgage. And, again, we're fortunate to have banks. Banks are a necessity. Banks can be a blessing. I would have never been able to do some of the things I've done in life without the ability to borrow money and to have banks to help me along the way. But at a certain point, if you manage your finances responsibly and you have the goals and you have the dreams, there comes a certain point where you need to be more, you need to earn more interest than you pay. Eventually you need to make interest work for you.
Yeah.
And we talked about this off camera about owning having a car payment. If you have a 30-year mortgage and you have 2 car payments, you're paying a lot of interest to a lot of people. You're helping the bottom line for a lot of companies that aren't yours.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it's for some people it's a necessity, and it's something that we do for a time. But I would encourage people to set goals so that eventually you can earn interest on money and pay for vehicles rather than, borrowing money and paying interest on that. And here's what I mean by that. If you're making 6% interest or, 5 to 6% interest on money that you've either invested or saved, you can grow that money to the point where that interest pays for your vehicles.
Yeah.
Well, that interest pays for this, pays for that. And at that point, your money is working for you instead of you just working for money.
Yeah.
So, understand interest. Einstein said interest is the 8th wonder of the world, the most powerful force there is. Compounding interest is so very important, and it can be something that keeps you paying other people, adding to other people's bottom line, or it can be something that you eventually make work for you.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, and a couple things from that, one, like you mentioned, short of you inheriting, having parents, whatever, let's just sit that to the side for a second and say, if you don't have that, you're going to start probably renting. And then your goal is probably going to be to buy, unless you're in a situation where it never makes sense. Similar to these kind of conversations in the sense that everybody has to start from somewhere, right? What you're saying is the transition from I've got to borrow the money to now I can lend myself the money, and so to speak. And we talked about last episode being generous and having financial, ability to do that. I say all that to say, when you go from borrowing the money to debt, all debt's not bad. Let's say that too, right? Because we talk about aggressive versus conservative, and we're talking about some people are very debt averse. Like, all debt's not bad. If you look at big businesses, they're taking on debt, but they're taking it on at a lower interest rate than they ever earn other places, which is what you're talking about. Meaning, if my car is financed and it's 2% interest, and I can take that money and put it in savings and earn 5 or 6%, that may make sense. When interest rates are 8-10% on cars, that probably doesn't make sense. So I guess it's just the principle of growing and learning. The other thing I would say from all that is this is one of the most important topics in a person's life, and I think it's important we take personal ownership of this topic in our life. And to me, there's no excuse or no reason for people to not get educated on this topic in today's world. Obviously you've been doing this 24 years. Even though I'm in software now, I actually have a finance degree from VSU. I have my investment licenses from doing other things. So I don't take for granted the fact we probably have knowledge that just an average person not doing this every day has. But what a person listening does have is ChatGPT, and they have YouTube, and there's tons of information out there. There's books, there's courses. And I want to challenge everybody, I guess, to say, to this point in the podcast, don't get lost in the noise of all that's too complicated for me. I don't understand any of it. Because you're never going to get where you want to go wealth-wise until you take personal ownership.
Yeah, and to your point, education should never stop. You know, the average American spends 12 years in school. Some of those people that spend 12 years in school go on to 4 to 6 to 8 years in college, somewhat. But most people reach a point in life where they just quit learning. They for whatever reason. And, you know, I would encourage you to be a lifetime student. You spend most of your week working for money. Why not learn everything you can about it?
Sure.
You know, most of the average American spends 30 years paying on their home, and most people move every 7 to 7 years, so they never get their house paid for. If they do, it's at retirement or whatever. How far ahead in life would you be if you were at a position where compound interest worked for you instead of against you? You know, and you can get there. You know, I have so many people that I know that have not had a house payment in years, have not had a car payment in years, and they get new vehicles and they live in nice homes.
Sure.
But and where that home becomes an asset is when you have equity in that home. Yes, it can be. I understand why people call a home an asset. Some do, and some call it a liability. It can be a liability because it's still going to have things that'll tear up, and you're still going to have to repair. I understand the logic on both sides of those. I would say it's both, depending. But it's just this game that we play. Do you want to be like everybody else, or do you want to forego or defer some gratification in life to be able to live a life that most people only dream of? You're going to have discipline. You're going to have to do things differently. Yeah. This podcast is called Do Life Well. Well, in order to do life well, you're going to have to do life differently.
That's right.
That's the key to
That's
it.
Right.
And so a lot of these things maybe go against the grain of what you hear from day to day. But if you're willing to be different and to do different and to live different, you're going to have different results. Yeah. And in this case, in almost every case, better.
Yeah.
And so I would say this about compound interest: get to a point in life where it works for you and not against you.
Yeah.
And that you're not going to get there overnight, but get there. You know, and be consistent. The only way you're going to get there is through consistency.
100%. Talk a little bit about credit scores, how you get one. Impacts of it, why it matters, things of that nature.
Well, and this is, again, the credit, you can't borrow money without credit. I mean, if I'm a bank, I'm not going to loan you money unless I'm pretty certain you're going to pay that back.
Yeah.
And how do I know you're going to pay that back? I want to see your track record. I want to see your history. I want to see that you've paid other people back. Because if you don't pay other people back, you're probably not going to pay me back. Because how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah.
And so, not only do I want you to pay me back, but I want you to pay me back on time. If your house note's due on the 10th of the month, I want you to pay me on the 10th of the month. And that's being responsible on my end as the bank. So your credit score is how lenders base whether or not you're going to pay them back. They want to see that you're consistent, and they want to see that you're a good investment to them. Now, we're not born with a credit score.
Yeah.
You know, we go from, I don't know, I think say 350 to 850. These are the ranges are pretty close. You pretty much, everybody starts out at the lower range. Yeah. You can't build credit unless someone gives you credit. Most people have to start with a credit card, this and that. I'll tell you this, when it comes to interest, and we talked a lot about interest up to this point, the worst kind of interest that you can have is credit card interest. There are worse than that, payday loans and different things like that, but for the most part, credit card interest can put you in a hole that it is almost impossible to dig out. I said almost. Yeah. You can dig out of about anything. But credit cards is something that if you are going to have credit cards, and you almost have to start with some type of credit card to actually establish that credit rating and get yourself up there to the point where a lender will lend to you. Be disciplined. We go to that again. Pay it off every month. Don't charge anything because you have to charge it. Charge it because you need to build that credit score and you know you're going to pay it off.
100%.
Your credit score is made up of about 3 different areas. This is what people are looking at. They want to know how long you've had credit, how much credit you have versus how much you're using, your credit to debt ratio. So if someone looks at your credit rate, at your credit situation, and they see that you have $50,000 worth of available credit and you're using $45,000 of that, it's not good.
Yeah.
You want to keep those ratios down. When you get to 30% of that ratio, credit to debt ratio, it really affects your credit score. You get to 50%, it affects it even more. What creditors are looking for is someone that has available credit that they're not using.
Yeah.
The other thing that they're looking at with your credit score that will influence your credit score is, do you pay your bills on time?
Yeah.
They're looking for anything that's 30 days, 90 days, 120 days late. That's going to really pull that score down.
Yeah.
So history, credit to debt ratio, and are you paying your bills on time? The other part that they're looking at that really affects your credit, do you have any debts that you just have not paid that have been written off? Do you have any liens? Anything that you've just decided I'm not going to pay? All those things affect your credit score. If you want good credit, don't use any more credit than you have to, just enough to get it established. Pay your bills on time and stay consistent. It takes a little time to build credit, but that is important, So, again, is all debt bad debt? Unfortunately, there's a system created that requires debt, at least some, at least in the beginning.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and to me, I see sort of formulating out a visual path, so to speak, because it's like, have our vision. So we're putting together a puzzle. We got where we want to be 15, 20, 30 years from now, right? Our day-to-day decisions matter, getting us to that point. And you're a person and you're like, hey, I borrowed $1,500 from a payday loan or whatever. Consequences aren't that bad. I'm just not paying it back. Yeah, I'll take a little credit hit, whatever. Just not paying it back. Dings my credit, right?
Yeah.
2 years later, you're trying to get a loan for a car, and they don't want to give you that. And then 10 years later, you're trying to get a loan for a mortgage, but you can't get a mortgage because you hadn't had a car because you didn't have the pay. It kind of builds upon itself. And I don't say that from a perspective of like, if that's been you, there's no hope. There is. But I say it from the perspective of like, when you're 18 years old, like me example, and I'm going to do this with my kids, and if you have kids, do it. Like my granddad was kind enough, he went to his bank. I got like, I think it was $1,000 loan or something like that. They literally loaned me the money, put it in the savings account. And they didn't give me the money. It was strictly because I'm 18, now I have credit, let's start building that credit.
Yeah.
And so I took that gave me a little establishment. You can't do anything about your age, right? Your length of credit, you can't change any bit of that. So as soon as you turn 18, let's go ahead and start getting credit established, right? But then if you don't build upon them yourself, you don't end up being what the picture is. You know what I mean? And so it's just, it matters, I guess, is my point.
It does. And I was fortunate enough a similar situation. The first truck I bought, I had no credit. I couldn't have bought the truck, but someone said, hey, I got a CD up at the bank. I'll let my CD collateralize your truck loan and just make the payment on time. And that's how I started building my credit. And I paid it every month, paid it on time, paid it early most months, and paid it off even quicker than I had planned to. And that started me along the path. But here's what you got to realize. It's like a cell phone bill. You go down to Verizon, you get a cell phone, and you just decide, hey, I'm not going to honor this contract. I'm not going to pay it. That will affect your credit. People don't understand that. So this is something you need to, from a young age, be mindful of. Credit matters, because as that vision grows and as you create that vision, you're going to want to do things along the way that could be derailed by just bad decisions, and negligence and just not being consistent. And at the end of the day, it's a lot of it's got to do with just keeping your word. you went into a covenant with this person that you would pay this on time every month. Do your very best to do that before all these other unnecessary expenditures.
100%. We talked a little bit about boosting your income by increasing your value. So let's talk about that again here. And then let's partner it with, okay, we talked about insurance and saving and investing and owning a home and all of these great big things.
Yeah.
But I'm a person, I'm living check to check.
Okay.
How do we give that person hope to say, here's the path forward, right? There is a path. And we talked last time about, having confidence in ourselves and everybody, no one's special. Like everybody can accommodate and accomplish the same things in life. So to kind of put those together.
Well, it goes back to, again, we all have unique abilities. Your background, you have a background in finance and different things, and we share some commonalities there. But your day-to-day, the things you do during the day, I need help with. I'm not proficient,
Sure.
I can turn my computer on, I can turn it off, I can work a spreadsheet, I can send an email. Sure. I'm pretty good with ChatGPT nowadays.
Sure.
But much past that, I'm not great. I'm not coding, I'm not creating software, I'm not doing any of these things. I'm not going to explain to anybody else how to use a computer or how to work a system. That's a unique ability that you have.
Sure.
And I feel like once you start figuring that out in life, what are some unique abilities that I have? For me, I've tried to become a better communicator. I've tried to become a better leader because I learned at a pretty young age that I'm a decent leader, that people seem to want to follow me for whatever reason.
Sure.
And so I've kind of put my finger on a few of those areas, communication, leadership. You're good at casting vision, which is a big part of what I do as a financial advisor, as a wealth advisor. There's a lot of people that are better with numbers and better with figures and better with analysis than I am. Guess what? I just get them to work for me.
Sure. Yeah.
But the communication part, the casting vision, the leadership, that's what I really pour myself into, and that's the part that I'm trying to develop to a higher level daily.
Sure.
To find those unique abilities and get better and better and better and better at that so that I can add more value.
Yep.
A client hires me and retains me and keeps me year after year after year because I continue to try to add more value to them.
Yeah.
People want to help you in life, Gavin, but they're more concerned with how you can help them. And that's where that value comes in. So whatever field you're in, if you're listening to this, you're creating value for someone now. How do you increase that? How do you get better at what you do? There's no greater investment that you'll ever make than self-investment.
Sure.
Investing in yourself, grow.
Yeah.
I tell people this: if you can get to a point in life where you can save 10% of every penny you make, there's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon, one of my favorite books on just finance, just money in general, and how to manage money. The Richest Man in Babylon. If you've never read that book, get that book. It's very small. It's a quick read. It's just an excellent book. But the author talks about taking 10% of every penny you make and paying yourself first, putting yourself first, paying yourself first. Now I know, take another 10%. We are generous with that. We talk about generosity if you can, and then that's 20% that you're paying yourself first for 10%. You're paying your tithes to the Lord, being generous, however you believe in how you do that. The other 80%. Pay your bills, pay your liabilities, do these things, but start at the beginning with a percentage. And if you'll stick, the reason I like the percentage, because you'll stick to that percentage, then as you increase your value and as you make more, again, going back to that current, as you increase the size and the source of that income, then you increase the amount that you're saving.
Yeah.
Our goal is to save $100 a month. Well, that's great now, but if you double your income, why don't you double that? That's why we stick with percentages. So pay yourself first, put that money first, and that's how you get to the point where you can start investing. Okay? And then just stick to it and just be consistent over and over and over. What was the question? I know I've probably strayed away, but what was the actual
No, it's
question?
great. We were talking boosting your income.
Yeah, okay, so I am on point. I just wanted to make sure. So adding value. As you add value to others, you increase that income. And by increasing that income, because we've got percentages tied to it, we're increasing the investments in the different things we want to make, whether it's real estate that you invest in, whether it's stock market you invest in.
Yeah.
You know, let me say a little bit about, I didn't mention this because I kind of jumped past stock market, even though that's the main part of my job. Dollar cost averaging. A lot of people don't know what that is, but dollar cost averaging is when you invest the same amount of money on a routine basis in the stock market. Because the stock market historically is on an upward trend, there's still a lot of times there's more down days than there are up days.
Yeah.
So dollar cost averaging pretty much means that you're going to buy the same amount of these individual stocks or mutual funds, whatever you're investing in. You're buying the same thing, the same amount of the same thing at the same time during intervals. So maybe it's $100 a month. Every month I'm buying these stocks. More than likely you're going to buy on more down days than you do up days, and it's going to help you do that. And it's just consistency. I call it the drip method. Everything in my life is just dripping. I don't make many splashes in life, but I can be consistent. You know, whether it's losing a half a pound a week for 10 weeks or whether it's saving 10% of my income over the year and just investing a little bit month to month, $100, $50, whatever. It's a good way to get started.
100%. Yeah, and I think hitting on the book too, because part of the other question I'd kind of forgotten was, you know, giving hope. If I'm at a very beginner, amateur level in a lot of these conversations, that book's amazing from that perspective. Because it's like, you know, I think if you just start putting one foot in front of the other, I think, like I mentioned earlier, we all have to take personal ownership of this. People can't want it for us more than we want it for ourselves. We've got to be willing to put time in, learn. If you just kind of go laissez-faire, dancing through the tulip patch, the banks are going to win because they're just better at this stuff than we are, right? And again, banks aren't evil; we have to have them, but it's set up in a way when people make the comment, "The rich get richer," there's a lot of thoughts that go into why that is. It's kind of true. And the reason it's true is because wealthy people understand some of these principles we're talking about. They understand when to use a bank and when not to use a bank. And they know not to put debt on a credit card. And they know these kind of things. I need to insure the risk. I'm not comfortable taking on myself, but I'm going to self-insure some of these risks that I'm not going to buy insurance for. And they have people, and I think that's the other thing too, which we've talked about, is having a team of professionals around you. You know, you don't have to be a multi-millionaire to have an advisor, to have a tax person, to have an attorney, to have professionals in your life that can help you with this stuff.
Well, that's huge. You know, before I leave here today, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about software, about computers, because I don't know. I'm not a professional in that area, and I'm never going to try. Sure. I'm not a do-it-yourselfer. This DIY stuff, it may work with, you know, something around the house. But it might not be the best thing to do with your finances, okay? Get professional advice. Don't, you know, if you're 18 years old and your buddy says, you just need to invest in crypto, don't worry about anything else. Get you a professional, somebody that understands, because your buddy might not even know what crypto really is. He might not really understand blockchain. He might not really understand, you know, all of these different things. And there's so many trends. Don't get your advice from Instagram. Don't get your advice from TikTok. Find someone who, again, a fiduciary, somebody that's going to put your needs and your desires first.
It's funny you say that. My CPA loves that. I'll send her ideas. She's like, please stay off of Instagram.
It's like WebMD. I mean, I got a toothache, but I feel like, you know, you're dying. Exactly. No, I just got this pain back here. It's stress, anxiety. No, you got cancer. Just stay off of the internet. Consult. I will ask the stupidest questions. Because I don't know. If I don't know, I'm not going to pretend to know.
That's right.
And I'm going to, you know, daily I seek advice. Daily. The Bible says there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. Get you some people who know. Don't take financial advice from broke people. Don't take marriage advice from people with bad marriages. Find people who are doing good in areas and get advice. And don't get blanket advice. It might not be the best for you what they're doing, but get, again, a multitude of counselors. And ask questions, ask lots of questions, ask dumb questions, do these things. I want to say this. I don't know how close we are to finish it, but I want to say this while it's on my mind so I don't forget. You got to start small to get big. If you've never saved, if you're in debt, I don't care what kind of hole you're in, you can dig your way out of it. You just have to get started. Get started, start small, but start now. If you've never had a budget, I've heard so many people that say, we're going to get our finances right. We eat out too much. We're going too many trips. We do all this. And they sit down and they say, we're not going to eat out anymore. We're not going to go on any trips. To this day, we're going to be disciplined. Start slow. Take small steps. Rome wasn't built in a day. You eat an elephant one bite at a time. Cut it in half. We eat out 5 days a week. Eat out twice a week.
Yeah.
Don't cut it all out overnight unless you got that discipline. If you can, more power to you, but most people give up because it's too hard.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm going to lose 100 pounds. I'm not going to eat carbs. I'm not going to eat bread. I'm not even going to smell chocolate.
Yeah.
Come on, man. You're not going to do that. It's not realistic. Finances are the same way. Adjust, okay? If you can put yourself in a better situation, just take those small steps, but stick to it and be consistent. It'll work out.
100%. Yeah. No, and I think and I'm pretty close to the end. If you have any other topics, thoughts, tips, tricks, more stuff for the internet people to listen to that we said shouldn't.
Yeah, well,
feel free to share.
All I say is this: you're gonna make mistakes along the way. You're gonna, if you even with the best plan, it's still just a plan. You can't control the economy. You cannot control the stock market. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
You cannot. There's so many things you can't control. But I'm a firm believer in control the controllable.
Yeah.
What can you control? You can control your discipline. You can control your habits. You can control your routines. I heard a man one time, I think it was Jim Rohn, he said the reward is in the routine, but so is the ruin. Mm-hmm. It's the things you do daily. Your habits. You have spending habits. Are they good habits? Are they bad habits? You have saving habits. Are they good? Do you save? Do you save consistently? Develop good routines. Develop good habits. Be honest with yourself. If you're married, you don't need 2 pictures, 2 visions, 2 destinations. You've got to come together on these things. And what happens is, in most cases, there's one person in a family that's a little bit more disciplined than the other. I think there's one influencer that says there's a nerd and a free spirit, and you're always trying to figure out how to balance everything. The way you do that is you have a unified vision. This is where we're going. This is what we agree on. One day I'd like to own a bunch of land. Okay. I want to hunt whitetail and I want to hunt turkeys. My wife don't care nothing about deer. She don't care about turkeys.
Sure.
I want that. But I'm not just going to sit down and build that vision, because there's certain things on that land that she wants.
Sure.
Certain things in that house that she wants. And so we're creating and crafting this vision together. That does change somewhat. Sometimes you think you want something and then you realize you can have it and you're like, well, I don't think I really wanted that together. That's fine. But we do that together. We sit down, we talk, and then we're doing it for the same reason, headed for the same destination. And it's easier for us to hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah.
And it creates less friction
100%.
in the marriage. So start now, start small. Develop those habits. Again, the reward is in the routine. Develop good routines. Don't think you're going to turn it right. If you're headed in the wrong direction for the last 10 years, you're not going to fix it overnight. It might take you 10 years to fix it, but that's okay. Get started now and start small.
No, I love that. Well, guys, this has been great. A 2-month in a row fundamentals of personal finance. I hope you guys enjoyed that, found lots of great value. I did, as always. Thank you for spending time with me and the listeners. I know that everybody appreciates the time that we've put into it. So
enjoy it, man.
Yeah, 100%. You guys keep doing life well, and we'll talk again next month. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on the Do Life Well podcast, where we explore topics like fatherhood, business, health, wellness, and so much more. With each episode, we aim to inspire and guide you in embracing the art of doing life well. If you found value in today's conversation, please leave us a review, subscribe, and share with your friends. Until next time, continue the journey of doing life well.